Man, I probably need to move my coffee cup, don't I? Okay, doing a mic check. Is this thing working? Is it clear? Do I need to tweak or change stuff? Awesome. It works a lot better if it is clear than if it isn't. Could make this very interesting if we just were at it just went that weird bits. Just out of curiosity, while we're still waiting on, we've got about 6 or so minutes before we scheduled-ish time. I know, John, you're playing Death Knight as your main. Is that still correct? And Ace, I think you're playing, what, 5 characters at once? Sub-rogue, okay, cool. What is it what's changed on sub that actually makes it useful? Nice. So for some of you other guys that are here, like Crystal Tech, what are you guys playing at the moment? What are you looking forward to in Shadowlands? Ah, that green icon that's swinging. Yeah, okay. So that is a mod that I wrote called Cursor Cooldown. So basically, it'll do your cast time, it'll do your swing timer, spell cooldowns. The ring is basically just a piece that's sitting around it, just a nice big decoraty type bit. But you can CC stuff, but you can also turn around and attach unlocks and spell cooldowns. Like, you can actually attach your spell cooldowns around it. Type stuff. That's what it does. So you can actually customize it a bit. So it's literally like when there's a... So that's my GCD timer at the moment. So that every time that's spinning around, it's telling me my GCD. If I log on my Shadow Priest and I use some of my Shadow Priest abilities, so like in the four corners, it'll put an icon. It'll tell me the cooldown of like Mana Fiend and its pieces like that. For Mage, it tells me my Ice Block cooldown and stuff like that. So it was originally a mod that was, I can't even remember what it called, but it was abandoned sometime after Lich King. So I picked it up because a friend said, "Can you fix this and make it work?" So picked it up and made it work. It's crazy type stuff that. I wonder if I can actually add a spell cooldown to it. So, like, if I add Avenging Wrath, close. So now when I hit it right in the middle there, you'll see that there's an icon under my mouse. Let's move it. Hasn't quite done anything, has it? Yeah. Let's move it around a bit. Did I move it yet? No. I'll get the settings from my priest and bring it back. Going to Demon Hunter for tanky crystal? Yep. Yep. So, minus 18. Somebody just remember minus 18. No, I've done something and made it worse. Okay, there it is there. So it's not quite in the right spot yet, but it's starting to move. Yeah, but that's basically now counting down. So that's 66, 65, 64. It'll just keep counting down till I get to it being available again, then it'll disappear. So that's Cursor Cooldown. Yeah. Gonna rate. So was it Scarred? You're gonna rate? Was it no BM again? Nice. I think if I'm playing a hunter, it has to be a BM because I just loved having the Molten Core Hound as a pet. Somebody will turn around and tell me it's the wrong pet and I should have some other pet, but yeah, I like it. All right. So it's 11 o'clock my time. So depending on whereabouts in the world you are, it could be anywhere between 9:30 p.m. and 11 a.m. So I'm talking to you from the 11 a.m. spot. So I'm talking to you from the future, looking back to wherever you happen to be in the world. So thank you guys for coming out and joining us this morning. So our aims and objectives are literally, I want to cover 4 things. I want to look at how to write and edit macros, how to tune your macro or how to tune somebody else's. The mysteries about MS. So basically you keep on seeing this stuff about MS and what does that even mean. But I also want to look at some things that don't work the way people expect them to work. Some ways around some of those, some gotchas, some bits and pieces. So I'm not going to work through these sequentially. I'm going to be moving through these and backwards and forwards in between. But it's just literally there's a bunch of stuff that I read and I sit there and go, what? That's just utter garbage. And some of it, it's like, especially the stuff around MS, I'm sitting there reading some of this stuff and it hurts my head sitting there going, okay, somebody's come up with this somehow, and I really appreciate the fact that they've tried to come up with this, but it's not the state of things anymore, if that makes any sense. So literally, writing and editing macros, there is a weird science, there is a black art, and there's a couple of guys that I sit and watch, and I look at some of the stuff they create, like John Metz, like Elfie, and they make some stuff that is above and beyond ways and bits and pieces I've thought. So feel free, John, and you're sitting here, I don't know if Elfie's here, but if you guys are here, feel free to correct me at any time when I get it wrong. I don't pretend to know everything about macros. I've concentrated on writing a mod that other people can then make fancy, funky stuff, if that makes any sense. So I don't come to you as, I'm not the expert at writing macros, I'm the expert at the mechanics of what happens underneath the hood inside a GSE. I leave writing macros. Yes, people say, why don't you release this macro or that macro? Well, some people have given me macros that they've asked me not to release, so I don't, out of respect for them. And in other cases, some people turn around and see that I've done a macro some way and think that every macro has to be the way that I've done it. And it creates it, locks it up. I'd rather release macro writers to create amazing stuff as opposed to being the ultimate experty type bit. Does that make sense? In a weird sort of kind of messed up kind of way. Right, so I'm looking at the comments box to see like what pops up from time to time. So I will stop and pause and breathe. Throughout this bit, ask questions as you have them. Just write them in. I will answer whatever I can in whatever means, some form of cohesive order that I can. I will ask bits where I'm actually asking you guys to respond and comment, just so that I can actually check that you're still awake and I'm not boring you half to death type stuff. But creating and editing macros is probably where we'll start. I'm using GSE. I'm using the build for 2.6 that'll be available. That's already available in beta for BFA, but it's the build that'll go forward into Shadowlands. A lot of the things in this you're going to already exist. If you're using 2.5.11, all the stuff we're going to look at today is exactly the same under the covers. The big difference between what GSE will do for Shadowlands and what it'll do for BFA is I've tried to solve a lot of the corrupt macro, like where it doesn't save properly or you've saved a macro and it wipes everything out. I've tried to make that a lot more stronger and a lot more resilient and a lot more forgiving is probably the better word of doing it. So, because GSE used to store as a string, and we used to edit it, we used to do all of this manual stuff in code with Notepad and bits and pieces. And even when we moved it in game, things like missing a comma or missing a bracket or all this technical stuff could really mess up a macro. So what I've done, we've evolved to this point, but what it's actually storing now is instead of storing the compiled code, it's actually storing the same string that goes onto the forums and back and bits and pieces like that, so that when you open the game, it reinterprets that thing and actually creates the code, so that if there's a quirk or a change or some other weird bit that's happened between you logging off and logging on, it'll auto-correct for that. So all the stuff we're going to look at today, this will work in 2.5.11, it'll work in 8.3, it'll work in BFA, it'll work in Shadowlands, PTR, even work in Classic. But creating a macro is literally the place where I start isn't in-game. I start over here with Icy Veins. So if I just change my screen for a sec. So I start with Icy Veins. I literally read through, I go to the class I'm playing, I find this one that's rotation, cooldown, bits and pieces, and I read through how it's supposed to work. Because these guys have figured out, okay, if you do this particular rotation in this order, you'll get the best results. So what I'm aiming to try and replicate is I'm aiming to try and replicate the stuff that's on this page to the best of my ability. So, I'm currently running an Inquisition-based Retribution Paladin for what we're looking at this morning. So I'm going to be looking at stuff like, you're trying to get this order and rotation to work. The scary part is that up until, I think, 2.5, somewhere in the middle of 2.5.10, I can actually get it so that it will follow this order. But in previous ones, the order is all over the place. So if I look at my Retribution Paladin macro, so if I look at that in game, and if I throw this over on the side there, and bring back Icy Veins, throw that over the side here, the order of this stuff is not the same as the order of what they've got in this list. Right? One of the big things to consider is, it may say do Blade of Justice, Judgment, Crusader Strike. What I put in on this side, the order has to be a little bit different for it to all go together and for it all to work. So it's literally a case of, what I've got is, even before we get to that point, we've got a couple of boxes around here that can make all of this stuff very, very, very interesting. And I've triggered the bug with Ace. And I need to fix that bug. That thing about the frame resizing, if I'm on tab 1 or 2, it's an actual problem with Ace, and I've been waiting for them to fix it for a couple of years. But as I use their mod library the way they're not expecting to, that's why it still exists. Yeah. When I get a bunch of time and I'm actually not... Like, when I get a bunch of time, I need to rewrite this part, this sequence editor frame. So, I'll make this a little bit bigger. Here we go. Okay. So the way that one of the fundamentals about GSE works relates to this box, key press, sequence, and key release. Okay? So what happens is that every time that you turn around and you do your, every time you run your macro, what is actually happening is these two lines in key press are put before this line of Templar's Verdict and then this line of key release. So what it actually ends up looking like when I press the button the first time is I'm not just sending Templar's Verdict. What I'm actually sending is I'm sending these lines, which I'll do some copy and pasty type stuff. So when I press the button the first time, I'm actually sending those three lines simultaneously. Right? The second time I press that line, the second time I'm pressing the button, I'm sending these three lines simultaneously. Right? So it's basically taking everything in key press, adding it in front of this line out of the sequence, and then in this case I've got nothing in key release, but if I had anything in key release, that stuff would be down through here as well. So it would actually send this block on that one click. Now why this matters is there's a thing called the global cooldown. So it's literally like if I turn around and hit a spell or hit an ability, even if it's an instant cast, there's a 1.5 second cooldown between when I can cast the spell next. So the way that Blizzard interprets this is that it starts at, to make it simple, I'll just use this top stack. It starts at the top of the list and evaluates down. Once it hits a GCD ability, every GCD ability underneath won't work. So for example, if I've got just cast Flash of Light, so where I've got mod alt Flash of Light, if that was just cast Flash of Light, I would never get to the Templar's Verdict line because it would basically go, you've already done a GCD ability, stopping there. Now, even if this is on cooldown or it's on whatever, it'll never get to Templar's Verdict. So we use these mod alt things in key press as an override of what's happening underneath. So it's literally, if I hit this line and I've got the alt key pressed down, it'll do flash of light instead of doing Templar's Verdict. But it doesn't matter what line I'm on, I can press the alt line at any point and it'll override the light. Same as like in these other ones, I've got a mod shift that'll do a Divine Storm or a Templar's Verdict. So it'll do a Templar's Verdict unless I'm holding the shift key down, and then it'll do a Divine Storm instead. Right, that's how this kind of stuff over the side here works. So the mechanic, where it comes back to this other mechanic-y type bit, is that even though I've got these lines in these order, it's not the same as this. So the first thing it'll do is it'll try Templar's Verdict, then on the second click it'll try a Shield of Vengeance, third click it'll try a Blade of Justice. But this macro is built around the fact that this whole thing is operating that there's a 1.5 second cooldown. Now, I mentioned this thing about MS, right? Can I just ask people what people think MS is? And can you write this back into the chat box of literally what your understanding of MS relating to macros is? Because I'd like to actually address some stuff that you're actually looking at, as opposed to just prattling on for 10 minutes about what might or might not be. Yeah, so how many times you click per 1 second? Yep. Yep. You Alright, does anyone have a different interpretation about MS than what Funkaholic has put in? Okay, so I'm assuming that you don't. So here's where some little bit of funky stuff that comes in, right? So time delay between operations. Yeah, it's literally, MS is literally around about the amount of times you're clicking a macro. Alright, so a lot of people craft around 100. And here's a nice, interesting bit of stats. Right, so if you can see I'm doing this in Notepad, but say I have this macro. I tried doing this in Excel, but right. So I have this macro, 5 lines long, 5 lines. I'll tell you a little bit of trivia. If you're running at 100 ms, you're running at 15 clicks a second, right? If your GCD is also 1.5 seconds, that means that for your macro to operate, it'll operate on every 15th click. Right? Now, here's the funny part. If your macro is 5 lines long, and your GCD is 1.5 seconds, and you are running at 100 ms, here's a nice interesting stat for you. Alright, you will only ever cast one line of the macro, and that is line 1. Let me just check, so that you guys can see what I can see. I got 1,000 windows open, and do you think I can find the one that I'm after? Okay. Alright. So, if you're running 5 lines long, your GCD is 1.5, and you're running at 100 milliseconds, you will only ever cast line 1. Because... Alright, spell 1, 15 clicks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Next spell 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So forth, so forth, so forth, so forth, so forth. So your MS, why I turn around and say, yeah, some people put all this stuff about MS, is they'll look in game. So 100 MS is 10 clicks a second, but if your GCD is 1.5 seconds, that means you've got 15 seconds per action. So you've got 15 clicks between this line and whatever happens next. If that makes sense, Sidus? Right. So some people turn around and they look at, I don't know where it is in ELV, but they look at the delay that they've got between them and the server, and the milliseconds between the world and the chat, and then they try and craft a number that my macro should run at blah. It's absolute crap. It literally depends on how fast are you clicking your macro as to how many steps it moves. An interesting stat for you. The lower your MS, the more random your macro will become. Because if you're running at 500 MS, right, that's 2 clicks in a second, right? If you're running at a 1.5 GCD, that basically means you've got 3 clicks. And you can literally walk through your macros, right? Okay, I'm running at 1.5, so click 1's going to be this. 1, 2, 3, click 3 is going to be that. 1, 2, 3, click 3 is going to be that. 1, 2, 3, click 3 is going to be that. Click 3 is going to be that, and you can literally walk through your macro because you can actually time it. If you're running at 50 MS, in a GCD window, you've got 30 clicks between GCD abilities. So there's people that are turning around and trying to build their entire macro around all of this weird and wonderful crazy stuff. The fun part of all of that is, the slower your MS, the more reliable and the more accurate your macro is going to be. Now, to make this even more interesting, yeah, and running under 100 MS, it's literally, if you can press a button 10 times a second, fantastic. Can you press the button 10 times a second? If you can press a button 10 times a second for a 10-minute fight, fantastic. That's a lot of RSI. If you're turning around and using something that's an auto clicker and you're under 100 milliseconds, like some people are running at 20, 30 milliseconds, that's over 1,000 clicks a second, right? And it's not about I've never had any issues. It's basically you're raising a flag to say, I am not human, please come and investigate what I'm doing and make a judgment call as to whether or not you think I'm human or not, right? And it's literally, it's not about I've never had any issues, it's about I am waving a flag at Blizzard saying I'm doing something not human, please come and investigate me. And it's not a case of they haven't done it yet so they never will, it's more a case of you're playing Russian roulette, going, they haven't looked at me today, they didn't look at me today, they didn't look at me today, bang, why did they look at me? If that makes any sense. So if you're under 100 MS, you're really raising a flag. The lower under 100 MS you are, the more you're raising a flag that you're not a human interacting with stuff. Right? So that's MS. So I would say 100 is the slowest I'd ever turn around and put in. But if you're trying to write your macro and you're writing at 100 MS, you're literally thinking 15 clicks per GCD. If you're running at 50 MS, you're thinking 30 clicks per GCD. So when you're trying to create your macro, you've got to build it around the fact that it's going to take 30 clicks between this and what happens next. Right? Because your GCD is 1.5 seconds. Nah. It's always going to be dependent on class. It's always going to be dependent on your computer. It's also going to be dependent on your gear. Right? And it's even, why I say it's going to be dependent on your gear, because if your haste lowers your GCD, some people I know have a GCD of 0.8 seconds. Right? You turn around and run the macro that they're running at 0.8 seconds GCD versus a macro running at 1.5 seconds GCD, it's going to execute completely differently. And it's going to execute completely differently because of the fact that this guy at 100 milliseconds has got 8 clicks per action. This other guy over the other side here has got 15 clicks per action. Does that answer that question, Funk? So it's always going to be not just dependent on class, it does, right? So if you as a player decide I'm going to set my stuff to run at 100 milliseconds, I can give you a macro, John can give you a macro, they're going to be perfect for us, but you're going to need to change it for you. And so this is why I'm talking about writing a macro and tuning a macro are pretty much the same bit, and it's literally coming in here, and moving this stuff around so that you get the right result. Alright, repurpose file. Yeah, it always depends on variables. Alright, so I'm going to take this line out because it doesn't make any sense. But what I'm going to do, let's just scrap all of this. Let's create a new macro. So, if I bring up sequence editor on this side, right? What did our icy veins list say we should have in our order? If I can find my icy veins window again. So what does it say? I should have Blade of Judgment, Judgment, Crusader Strike, Inquisition. Okay, so Blade of Justice. Sorry, this is slow because I can't spell justice begins with a J, it's after G. I'm gonna be faster just typing these. That's the venue graph. What's it got next? Hammer of Wrath. Do I have Hammer of Wrath? Because did I talent it? No, so I need to do a Crusader Strike again. Crusader Strike. Crusader Strike. Okay, Templar's Verdict. So this is the sequence that Icy Veins has put out for us. Now, I don't have Hammer of Wrath, I don't have Execution Sentence, but I might one day want those. So what I do is come up here to my talents. Where's Hammer of Wrath? Hammer of Wrath is so row 2, level 3. So I go. Oops. Right, an execution sentence is a level 1. Right, so these two lines I've put in, this talent 1-3, talent 2-3. So it's basically saying if I have this talent, cast Hammer of Wrath, otherwise cast Crusader Strike. Right? If I've got this talent, so I've got Execution Sentence, cast Execution Sentence, otherwise cast Templar's Verdict. Right? So you can actually customize this little bit here, this modification turns around and allows us to customize our rotation type bits. But if we execute this right now, we've got that whole millisecondy type thing to worry about. Right? So one of the ways around that is if I go into, so let's go new. Let's call this New Ret Madness. Created live on the stream. Dunk. So I've got all of that. Let's just go save. Right. If I go into my options, one of the things that we added in just recently was around about timing-based macros. Now, how timing-based macros work is if we know that our clicks are 100 milliseconds, for example, we know that there's going to be 10 clicks in a second. It means that we can actually start doing some timing stuff. And we can start tweaking and changing some bits and pieces. So I've got a click rate of 100 ms, and I've turned that on. What it then means that I can do is, in here, between this line and this line, I can go So I can put click pause 1.5, and so this will basically now run, and because it's counting clicks, it'll count 1.5 seconds of clicks before going from this line to this line to this line to this line to this line. But all of that works because I have auto hotkey set up to run at 100 ms, and I've got 100 ms in my options. Does that make sense? Now I might have something I might have a cast spell, right? I could turn around and go, say, cast what's Holy Light's the big paladin heal in it, right? It's got a 3-second cast. I can then go click pause 3. Do next thing. So forth, so forth, so forth, so forth, so forth. So I can turn around and change some of the mystery and the complexity of stuff, where in the past I had this whole random, where is my macro going? I can now turn around and actually plan out my macro a bit better. Now the way all of this stuff comes together, I've got these 1.5 pauses, right? I am thinking of doing this like as a thing of going something like this. So like pause your GCD. So that if your GCD becomes 0.8, it'll continue and line all of this kind of stuff up. Are there attack skills that aren't part of the GCD? Yes, there are, but there's less and less and less of them. The big challenge in one of the big challenges in Shadowlands is that cooldowns, say like Avenging Wrath, are coming off the GCD. So for something like that, I could turn around and take this line out altogether and just go click Avenging Wrath, cast the next one, because it'll just go bang bang. If that answers your question, Funk. So I've got, yeah. So it's just literally a case of, if I don't need it, I don't have to put it in. I still want so I've got my target enemy. So I've got this in my key press, but my macro is simplified down to just this simple rotation. So let's save the changes. We'll close this. Where's our new Ret Madness macro? There. I'll drag that down to my 2 key. I don't want to lose that button, so I'll throw it over there for the moment. And if we go up to our thing, right, you'll notice that this is just ticking over and it's waiting, and then it acts, then it waits, and then it acts. Right, I'm using damage done. My damage is ticking away. It's not as efficient as my old macro, but it's ticking away and it's doing the bits and it's working through bits. So if I run this other command, GSE debug, right, I drag this over the side and I enable it, I can then literally start, okay, so there's my thing, it's happening. So I did line 5, line 7, line 9, line 10, line 12, line 14, and it'll go back to line 1. So it's literally stepping through my macro, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. Yep. So this is just literally walking through my macro line by line by line by line by line, and it's not getting hung up. So what this is telling us is if I escape this for a minute and I walk away, and I bring up our rep macro that we're working on. So this new Ret Madness is the name of the macro. 5, 7, 9, 11 are literally the line numbers in here. So we'll see we've got line 1, Bladed Justice. This other stuff is all the reasons why something couldn't work. So I'm able to cast, resources are available, GCD's free, I'm not actively casting anything else. That green line basically means that this happened. So if I use one of my other macros, and I run it, you'll see there's a bunch of these red bits. Where these red bits happen, right, it's literally, I wasn't able to do anything in that block there because the red happened. So I've got a couple of these things. Add the line numbers in here. I have to rewrite this box to do it, but it is part of the plan, is to put the line numbers in there. But you know, so I got to this line Divine Storm, I wasn't able to cast, resources were not available. So Divine Storm it needs a certain amount of holy power, so it needs 3 holy power. I didn't have 3 holy power, I only had 2 or 1, so it failed. The next line, Templar's Verdict, again, I didn't have the resources available. Judgment, I was able to cast, the GCD was free, boom. And so it's stepping through line by line by line and telling you what's the current state. So I can turn around and take this, relate it back to this particular macro, and start looking through what's going on and what's happening and what's working and what's not working. Is that making sense for people? So using this thing, I'm able to turn around and make decisions about what needs to be in here, and I can tweak and change it. So I can look at stuff and going, well, actually, Inquisition went off. Great, that went off straight away. Yeah, I'm not expecting the Divine Storm or the Templar's Verdict to work because, well, I'm not expecting them to happen yet. But I am expecting that the Blade of Justice has gone on. This hasn't hit the Blade of Justice yet. I need to tweak and change this stuff. The other part of that stuff is, this is where it starts getting super complicated, is there's this bit pre-macro and post-macro. Now, we talked about key press, sequence, and key release being this big stack. Pre-macro and post-macro work like this. So if I scrap all of this other stuff that we've done, is I've got... Yeah, I'll come back to that a bit about a priority, about having to know the order. We'll come back to that in a second. Alright, so say I've got this pre-macro line 1 and 2, sequence lines 1, 2, and 3, post-macro line 1 and 2. So, yeah, pre-macro, I've got 2 lines here, 3 lines here, 2 lines here, and I've got this thing, this loop limit. I don't know why I've got a loop limit of 1, that should literally be 3 or 4 or something, but what happens is, when you start the macro, it'll execute these pre-macro lines first. It'll go boom, boom, and again, if you're not using the pause function, you've got 15 clicks. So I've got this pre-macro, and it's literally 10 lines long. I will randomly get to do one of those things when I get back to the pre-macro. But that's just this particular macro. Right? But what will happen next is it'll then start looping through the sequence part. So when this executes, it will try... Yeah, pre-macro line 1, line 2... sequence lines 1, 2, and 3. Great. It'll then get to the end of the sequence stuff, and then it'll look at this loop limit. So, with a loop limit of 3, it will then do... sequence 3 times, and then it will do the post-macro before it goes back to the beginning of the pre-macro. So, it's literally, if this loop limit is greater than 1, or 0, if it's greater than 0, it'll do this once, this, however many times are in this box, then it'll do this, and then go back to there. So it'll go here, zim, 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 here, here, zim, 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 here. Right? When you're looking at the output of this, it's talking like 14, 15, because it's counting line 1 as that's line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. This is then line 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and so forth. So it's counting line numbers from here, but it's literally a case of it's going 1, 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 1, 2, 3, 1. If this inner loop limit is 0 instead, it's doing this once, and then doing this. Round, 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 round. And it won't get back out of here until you exit combat. So it'll do this stuff once, and then do this. So if you're a mage and you've got the Arcane Familiar talent, if you're turning around and doing... If you're doing, you click pause in that, it'll then proceed through and do all the lines in it. Otherwise, it'll do one, in this particular case, it'll do the first one and then do a random thing inside of here before it gets stuck in the middle, if that makes sense, John. But it's literally a case of, yeah, it'll do this stuff once, it'll try and do this stuff, then it'll do this, and loop. And it's all tied around the whole looping part of stuff. The quirky type stuff is when you go from sequential to priority, is that the way that this executes is different. So it isn't just a case of it going line, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then back. It's going, if I bring this up the other way, I'll just bring it back to just these 3 sequence lines. The way this is executing is it's executing line 1, line 1 and 2, and lines 1, 2, and 3. So it's literally, when it's looping through this part here, it's literally going Divine Storm. Then next click, Divine Storm, Shield of Vengeance. Divine Storm, Shield of Vengeance, Blade of Justice. Divine Storm, Shield of Vengeance, Blade of Justice, Avenging Wrath. Divine Storm, Shield of Vengeance, Blade of Justice, Avenging Wrath, Inquisition. Divine Storm, Shield of Vengeance, Blade of Justice, Avenging Wrath, Inquisition, Divine Storm. And then it goes back to starting again. So this order through here is variable on this bit up here. So you're turning around and you're running at 100 milliseconds, you've got 15 clicks per bit. Your 15 clicks are click 1, so 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So my second thing, my first one's a Divine Storm, my second one's an Inquisition. Then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. My third one is a Blade of Justice. So the way this is actually working is I do a cast. So Divine Storm, Inquisition, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I've lost it already. So trying to figure out where this is and step through it in your head to try and then replicate this is like a definition of madness and insanity. However, by tweaking and testing and playing around with this box and playing around with this stuff, this is how it's iteration, it's time. You turn around and pick up a macro from someone, it's not going to work exactly 100% perfectly for you. It's going to work 100% perfectly with them, but you may need to turn around and move a line. You may need to turn around and go, actually, I need to put a pause in for a second because I'm all out of sync, or I need to, all the pauses are 1.5, my haste is 1.1, so I need to change the bits and pieces. All of that stuff doesn't mean the macro's wrong or the macro's crap or whatever. It just means it works for the person that wrote it, and they're sharing what they've wrote. And what we need to do as users of stuff is to turn around and go, okay, that's fantastic. I need to tweak this for my situation. I need to change some bits. I might need to put an extra Templar's Verdict in, or I might need to put an extra other bit in so that it lines up in bits and pieces. And then you turn around and you've done all that stuff. I'll bring my normal main macro back. I will clear this. I will close this. And I'm using this one. Right, so I'm using this one's Templar Vault. And I just sit here. Okay, let's clear all this. Where's the clear button? Reset all data. Great. Okay, top time is ticking. I'm now keeping score. Boom. So I'm going to run this for 2 minutes. I'll have an average DPS number. It should be probably around about 40-45k. I then turn around and look at, what do I change? Do I move some stuff? Do I tweak some stuff? Do I add something in? You don't need to be good at math, but the process type stuff is heavily tied to math. And it's statistics, and it's looking at things and evaluating bits and spending time and tweaking it and changing it. So I'm running this. I'm not just running for my burst period. I'm waiting till Avenging Wrath resets. So another 49, 50 seconds. I'll disable this just so that it doesn't keep locking up my macro. This thing running, this is a resource hog because it's literally every single click it's recorded what's happened. And you'll see that like, this line here, this Blade of Justice line worked because it was green. These couple worked, but these ones that are red, it didn't work for whatever reason. And it keeps adding, and because this is now thousands of characters long, it slows your computer down. But, yeah, 18, 17, 16. So over a 2-minute period, I'm doing 41, 42k DPS, which is what I was expecting. Right. So if I want to tweak it, let's change this to be 3. Hit save. Yep, I'm out of combat. I hit the reset all data, which is that button there, and off I go again. I sit and hit the dummy, I sit and basically play it through, and I do it for another 2 minutes. And I compare this result to the previous one. The previous one was 40k and a half. So we see what this looks like at the end of the day. And it's just being patient, taking the time, not cheesing the process, pressing the button. I'm using the target dummy. And it's not just throwing darts at a dartboard. You make educated guesses, but you make educated guesses because you know your class, you know how it normally performs, you look at other people in your raid, you see their data, how it's behaving, and you tweak stuff. And sometimes throwing darts at the dartboard works, but it might even give you a place to start, and then it's just a case of testing and tweaking and working things out. So my change here, I changed one thing. So I changed the inner loot limit from 1 to 3, and I look like I've picked up 5k of DPS out of that. I've still got 28, 29 seconds, and if it sits around there, I may have picked up DPS. But it's looking at bits, and it's looking at what's my macro doing, what am I doing, what's my character and my class doing, are there things that I can change, are there things I need to tweak, am I using my trinkets right, do I need to turn my trinkets on and off, do I take out this line of repurposed Fell Focuser because it's not doing anything because I don't have Fell Focuser as my bit. All of this stuff going together is what makes it bit. So we've looked at how do you create a macro? You sit down and you just drag your abilities in off the spellbook. We've looked at some stuff about MS. We've looked at how to tweak, how to tune it. The last part of stuff I think I want to cover and cast and look at is some stuff that doesn't work the way people expect it to work or the way people think it'll work. Yeah. So I'm going to save that because that was an improved DPS thing. So I'm going to grab Notepad. So when you turn around and using a macro, some people turn around and they'll put in cast sequence. Spell 2, spell 4, spell 5. Now, the way this works for your macro is it changes the execution to be line 1, spell 2, line 3. Then the next time through, it goes line 1, it does this. Alright, question. Did spell 2 work on the second time through? If it did, do spell 4. Else, spell 2. And if we assume that it did work, and we got a spell 4, the next time it comes through, it asks, did spell 4 work? If yes, spell 5. Else, spell 4. Right? And it works through this stuff left to right based on these bits. But then you've got things that do things like reset equals combat. what'll happen is that if I leave combat, this whole thing resets. It's pretty self-explanatory. If I do reset equals target, when I change target, it'll go back to spell 2. So it might have been sitting here at spell 5, but irrespective, it'll go back to spell 2. The other fun one is if people put in reset equals 4. Now, what reset equals 4 is reset if I don't touch the button for 4 seconds. Right? It's not reset after 4 seconds, it's reset if I don't touch the button. That means that if I touch anything of the sequence, if I click the thing, I've got it spamming on a macro, I'm holding the 3 button down and it's hitting my macro, irrespective of whether it's on this line or not, it's never going to count 3 seconds because if every 100 milliseconds we're clicking, it's got to get through 400 milliseconds before, it's got to get to 4,000 milliseconds of you not using the macro for it to click. Right? So this is one of the big common ones. It's like, why didn't it reset after 4 seconds? Because it's got to wait 4 seconds. All right. The other fun one is that some people turn around and they try to do these kind of bits. Sequence. Let's go. I'll do a really common one. Null. The way that this is supposed to work is that this null is a nothing, and because it's a nothing, you get through this the first time it casts Shadow Word Pain. You get to it the second time, and it'll never cast null because null's not a spell, and it goes round and round and round and round and round in circles. The problem is, there's this thing. Right? There's also a couple of toys that start with the word null something or other. So what it can actually try and do is that it sometimes, especially in languages that aren't English, it replaces this with, and then it casts it. Does nothing, and then it goes back on to doing this. Now it's especially true if this is an item or a scroll or something else that it mistranslates or it misthrows in. All of a sudden your thing of casting Shadow Word Pain once and then not casting gets broken. And it's not something that GSE can fix, it's literally something that Blizzard has to fix. When this works, it means that you'll cast Shadow Word Pain on a target once and then never cast it again. But if your client, and it's client specific, it's a person specific thing, this will work for 9 people and not work for the 10th. But if your client can't handle this, you may have to change this to random work thing here, or something else. So it's not the word null. It's just a case of putting something in there that doesn't actually compute. Because if this never works, it'll never reset to the Shadow Word Pain. Right? And it's literally a case of it's something in here that doesn't work. It's invalid request, and you're deliberately forcing an invalid request. But even if you do that, here's the nice gotcha. Blizzard broke this in Legion. Right? No, 0 actually is something, so you can't put a 0. Because it'll turn around and try using your hat. And if you have an enchant or something on your hat that there's an unused ability because cloaks have had it, rings have had it, different pieces of gear have had it, belts have had it, all of a sudden it'll just start going, oh, I've used your hat, nothing changed, I'll go back to Shadow Word Pain. Yeah, headcanon. And even if you don't have a headcanon, it goes, yes, well, I used your hat, nothing happened, so I've gone back to Shadow Word Pain. So you can't use a 0. It's got to be something else. But even if you've got that, and you've got the random thing in here like that, and the random thing works, one day it won't, because Legion broke cast sequence in the fact that the Legion beta didn't have cast sequence. 1 week out, they put it back in the game. And when they put it back in, the strange things that happen is the stuff around here where it doesn't work properly, that causes issues. Right? If you don't have... So, that's the cast sequencey type stuff. The other fun one that is this. Cast Heart Essence. So this, if you have a neck piece and you've got a major essence installed and it's a castable thing, cast hard essence will activate it. If you're 110 or less and you don't have a neck, this is in your macro, it will lock up the game. It's not a case of it locks up your macro, it locks up the game completely. And it's just one of those bits and pieces. It just does the weirdest stuff. I'll come back to replace spells because there's ways around that are deliberate, and I'll cover that in a second. No, I'll come back, Crystal. I'll come back to replace spells. But hard essence, it does that stuff. If you're 110 or less and you don't have a neck, this will lock up the game. It's not locking up the macro, it's locking up the game. There used to be, for Shaman, there was a piece of follower equipment that was the same as a follower's, as one of the Shaman spells. And if you put that thing here, it would open up the follower menu thing, because it would use the item in your bag rather than cast the spell, and the item in your bag would bring up. That's one's less and less of a problem now than it was in Legion. But sometimes you've got these weird quirky things that affect a class and they affect just you. And it is a case of it is garbage in, garbage out, but it's some of that stuff to be totally aware of. Sometimes you're looking for a needle in a haystack. Yeah, so if you've got this and this, it will go Shadow Word Pain, spell 2, random thing here, spell 4, random thing here, spell 5, random thing here, spell 2. It puts them in like a table, not a compressing things. Now, yeah. So the last part of stuff is, yeah. So Paladins have Avenging Wrath, right? This is what we call a base ability, right? If you have the right talents, you can then have Crusade, which replaces right? Now, it changes it because the icon down here changes from being this hammer, and it actually changes to being like a horseshoe type thing. So if I change my talent, and I go from Inquisition to Crusade, it now says Crusade. Instant call on the light. If I go back to Inquisition, this says Avenging Wrath. Your UI does this change backwards and forwards. Warlocks have a couple of things where their abilities change when it used to be under Metamorphosis. There's a couple of other classes that turn around and do some of this. Survival Hunters have some of these ones. But it's literally a case of, even if I have Crusade, if I cast Avenging Wrath, the game will turn around and go, I will cast Crusade. Right? So if you cast the base ability, it will cast the current state of that. So if you've got a proc that's running and it changes Avenging Wrath to Crusade, or it changes Shadow Word Pain to Shadow Word Death, I'm making that up, but it does that kind of stuff for a period of time. By casting the base ability, the game will turn around and actually activate the replacing ability. So like cast Hard Essence will cast whatever your main thing on your neck is, irrespective of what that is. But to get around that, there are some cases where you actually need to cast the base ability as well as the upgraded one. So in Shadowlands, if you're a Shadow Priest, I think you can cast a Void Bolt while you're in an upgraded thing. So to get around that, use Void Bolt. It won't change. It'll always be use Void Bolt, as opposed to cast, which can then become Torment. Alright, so Survival Hunters, Crystal, I would say, is also, the way around it is, if you need it to absolutely stay as a particular ability, use the use. The problem is, if you have the upgraded ability, so if I had use Crusade, this will never cast Avenging Wrath if I change my talents and I don't have Crusade anymore. It'll only ever try and cast Crusade, that's it. Bits and pieces like that. So have I totally confused you guys yet? Same for Demon Hunter when the meta's active, yeah. Yep. Wildfire Bomb, Mongoose Raptor Strike. Yeah, so you can get around that by literally hard coding it to be a use Wildfire Bomb or a use Mongoose Strike or a use Raptor Strike when you absolutely have to use a particular version of the ability. Yeah. Yeah. That's literally pretty much, that's the stuff that I was looking at, trying to cover and trying to go over and look at. Is there any other stuff that I can help you guys with while you're sitting here? Place the use in the proper places. Yeah, it's just like that. It's just use. Instead of cast, it's use. You can't do this in a cast sequence, right? So you can't turn around and go, you can't do it. You can't do something like that. How do I bring up the debugger panel? All right, so GSE debug is one way. If I go into GSE's options, all right, and I go into, where is it? It's to show the minimap icon. Unhide the minimap icon. Right, so off the minimap icon, which you can't see because I'm running the WotC build and I've got my other stuff sitting in the road. So from here, I can middle click on the minimap icon. Or is it? No, right click and I can open the sequence debugger. Right. The other way of it, if you're running something like Elv, the other fun thing that you can do is on your data texts, panels. So, where's the mail one? Think UI left. Mail, I can add one in here called GSE. Right? And then I can middle click type stuff. So if I'm actually, what this literally tells me is what version I'm running. If there's a thing called the outer combat queue. So when I hit save, and I'm inside of something. When I hit save, I'm inside of something. It put queue stuff up so that when I get out of combat, it actually turns around and updates the button. So I can actually see what's in the queue if there is anything. There's target protection, so hunters can actually toggle this on and off so that you actually have to have a target before your macro works. It'll also list anybody else that's using GSE and what version they're using inside your party. You've got the transmission stuff to send it to other people. Chaining macros. So you asked about that. So I've got yeah. So I've got Prot God here and I've got Red ST1. And it's literally a case of when I edit my macro. So if I want it at the end, that's it. And then when I get to that particular line, it will click the other macro. That's all there is to it. Yeah, so I could put it anywhere in. You know, I could put it here, for example, and it's just click the other macro. That's it. That's all there is to it. It's not exactly rocket science. It's just literally a case of, yeah, some people are turning around and putting their thing up in here, and then what it's doing is it's sending clicks across to the other macro. But if that other macro has a GCD ability, you then got a race between the GCD ability here and the GCD ability in your other macro, and one will work, one won't, and which one works and which one doesn't. That's literally, it's just trial and error. There is no hard and fast rule on it. It's one of those bits, Crystal, you can do, but it's one of those bits that you really got to be working through, looking at the debugger and figuring out which part of stuff is actually activating and is the right thing activating the way I want it to. So Latechi created a use case, and I think there's literally much simpler ways of doing what he created, but what he tried worked. The details are in LazyMacros forum type bits. Yeah. So it's literally, I've got macro 2, macro 1, click, execute macro 2. That's it. Yeah. Just strike, save that, yeah, gone edit cast. I'm just looking through to see if there's anything else I've missed. Nope. Okay, do you guys have any other last minute questions, insults, commands, bad jokes? Things that I can clarify? With is that, well, with assassination? So hard to figure out without. Yeah, Titan, you could use that. You could turn around and go click. Dunk. Yep, you could turn around and do that. But by the same token, you could turn around and do. If I wanted to make this AoE, where's my Templar's Verdict? I could go. I could do that. Yep. Model, Divine Storm, or Templar's Verdict. And I could turn around and do this, have the same type of effect as the other. There's always multiple ways of doing it, and it's figuring out the right way that's going to work for you, and then understanding that somebody else has written it in the forum, they've written a macro, they've written what's worked for them. You're going to need to take it, you're going to need to change it, you're going to need to put it around a bit. Yeah, some people get super crazy, ridiculously messed up with bits and pieces like, oh, but so-and-so did it that way. Find what works for you. Find tweak some stuff, change some stuff, break some stuff. Nobody knew how any of this worked until we started doing it. and it's literally like, every release there's something that changes, every update, every macro, somebody thinks about a different problem a slightly different way, and they come up with a new way of doing it. Okay, so you slice and dice, you got issues with the previous buff, yeah, that's going to take a little bit of thinking through. Yep. So one of the things that GSE can't do is it can't see what is happening inside a combat, right? So what I mean by that is, if I look at my screen for a minute and say, this screen represents all the things inside of the WoW's API. API is an application programming interface. It's like, when I write a mod, I can only use the commands that Blizzard's API allows me to use. But if this is everything under the sun, all right, this little box up here in the corner, this little box up here, this represents the commands that can be executed inside of combat, right? So everything else outside this window, right, can happen outside of combat, but this stuff in the just the commands that are in this little box are the bits that can actually be executed when I'm in combat. How that has an effect on stuff is that, and I'm using that figuratively as opposed to I'm using it figuratively as opposed to, like, this isn't the commands. This is just representing the, if this is all the commands, that little area is the ones that are done. Weak auras, for example, does not actually do anything. It doesn't click any buttons, it doesn't cast any spells. All it does is it brings up information on your screen and tells you so that you can do something, right? So it doesn't run in the combat sandbox, it runs all the time, but it's doing look, not touch. For all the things that are doing the touch stuff, they can only see what's in that little corner of the world that is the combat sandbox. The minute they look outside that sandbox to what's out here, they enter into that touch. They enter into that look, don't touch space. I'll put this onto YouTube so that it's there as a reference, Titan. And this look, don't touch thing is one of those complexities. So GSE can only see what's in the box. When a proc happens, it happens out here, and you can see it, and Blizzard wants you to react to it, but a macro and a mod can't because it's outside the sandbox. So some of the bits where, but weak auras can do this, yeah, but weak auras isn't actually changing your buttons. Well, why can't it just cast Pyroblast when my Ignite proc happens? Well, it can't see that your proc happened. It's for the same reason why it can't see if a command succeeded or failed, which is when you're looking at your debug stuff. So when you're looking at this, even though it can see that it's not able to cast, it didn't work because of these two bits, the resources weren't there, because it didn't work because of that, it can't act on that information. As soon as it tries to act on that information, it's stepping outside the sandbox, and your entire macro stops. That's the only other weird, quirky type thing I can think of. But, awesome. Alright, well, if there's no other last minute questions, I will hold this here. Thank you all for being around. If you have any questions, ask on Discord. I will answer when I can. Bear in mind, I'm in Australia, which means that if you're asking at US time, I'm probably not going to answer it till the next day. Some people turn around and get grumpy because they post something at like midnight my time and I don't answer till 5 o'clock in the morning the next time. But all that kind of stuff, I will answer as what I can. What I don't know, I won't answer. Some people get offended at that, and it's just literally a case of, if I don't know the answer to your question, I won't answer it, because I'll leave it till someone that does know the answer. But generally, like, I'm easy to find, I'm easy to hassle, to annoy. But apart from that, I would wish you all a great evening, great morning, a great afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. If you have any questions, you can find me on Discord. I watch Discord more than I watch the Whale Lazy forum site. I literally click in there maybe once or twice a week to see if there's anything I need to poke my head into and then come back out of. But outside of that, yeah, I'm literally like, I look at the Whale Lazy Macros Discord, I look at GSE's Discord, and go from there. But apart from that, have a great day, a great morning, a great evening, and I will wish you a good night.